You know, when I was gonna start making this video, I came to the PV website just to use it as a backdrop for this video. And when I saw right here on the front page, I mean, I have to touch on this real quick. Here it's talking about a Bangladesh woman. She's a professor and dean of your school of business. And it's talking about how PV leads Bangladesh Development Initiative. Now, when it comes to our organizations and our institutions, I don't believe that there's absolutely no place for outsiders who could be allies. But when you see stuff like this going on, why are we talking about a Bangladesh Development Initiative? You know, of someone who can be designated as a minority or as a person of color, since they're melanated, or, you know, a lot more melanated than Japheth is. You know, where's anything about a ADOS development initiative? You know, and it really just has to make me wonder and question that, do we really even have any organizations or any spaces that are truly our own? I mean, when you look at the history of the NAACP and you look how it was founded, we know who it was primarily founded by, and who had the financial backing into it, and who was a lot of the leadership earlier on. I mean, so do we really have any organizations or any institutions that are our own? So when we look at it and take back and evaluate these HBCUs as well as these other institutions, no wonder why we can take a step back and say why these organizations have failed us. Because if they weren't truly founded by us, backed by us, financed by us, why should we expect them to work for us? So in this ADOS movement, everything needs to be challenged. We need to open up all of these organizations, look at the history, look at their founding, look at their backing, look at who participates in these organizations, and see what's going on. I mean, this is exactly a part of the problem right here. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but, you know, in one regard, I was kind of disappointed that I didn't go to a HBCU. You know, my mom went to a HBCU. She kind of steered me away from going to a HBCU because of her experience there, and she received master's degrees. But when you see some of this buffoonery that goes on, and some of these problems that they have, you know, and at the end of the day, if these organizations aren't really for us, I mean, you know, there's aspects of it where maybe it was good that I didn't go to a HBCU. I don't know. When you look at what Morehouse and what Spelman is doing with the whole transgender thing, it's like what are we really focused on? What's the initiative? You know, especially if you say, you know, an all-boys school or all-girls school. Now, there's plenty of other PWI, all-male, all-female institute. Take an example of Wellesley College, I think in the Illinois area, either Illinois or Indiana. Crooked Hillary went there, okay? Do you think that Wellesley College, a historic all-female college, prestigious all-female college, is going to say, oh, we're going to start letting in transgender males? No, they say, this is a school we made for women. It's a historically all-women's school, all-girls school. That's what it's for. But then we see our supposed institutions, you know, because what somebody did in the White House years ago, they want to say, oh, no, you know, let's start to embrace this LGBTQ stuff. I just don't get it. So, I mean, the priorities are scattered. We allowed ourselves to be convoluted in all these different messages and all these various different protected classes that really have nothing to do with us. And when are we really exercising our power? You know, and when you look at these bourgeoisie, boule types of our supposed community, most of them are produced by these HBCUs. And when you look at something else like these Grecian order fraternities and sororities, I mean, you have to really wonder, what are these institutions really about? I mean, you're copying what Japheth has done. I mean, now we definitely aren't Grecians, but you're going to join a Grecian letter order, not an ADOS order, not an African order, but Grecian. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but like I say, before you join any organization, before you commit to anything, a saying that one of my mentors had growing up, where he always used to say, just because it's black, don't make it right. And here, we're not really concerned, particularly for matters involving the United States, we're not really concerned about this quote-unquote so-called blackness or minority or person of color or protected class or status, or if an individual is maybe melanated, we're concerned about ADOSness. So as he used to say, just because it's black, don't make it right. And my advice to everyone is that before you join or pledge or sign up, undergo some kind of an admission process in any of these institutions, you need to do your homework. You need to understand the history, the founding, the financing, and the backing, and the participation, and the leadership structure of any of these organizations or institutions, to make sure if they're really working in the interest of our people, and if that's an organization that you should be a part of, or maybe should you choose a different route. So I'm going to get off of this for right now. What I intended to talk about was the revelations with the video of Sandra Bland. And in one regard, it doesn't necessarily add a lot of new information to what we know what happened. But the fact that there was a reveal and a cover-up of this, and I would stress the people who are, whether if you live there permanently, if you work there, or if you're just a student, I would recommend that the community in the PV area, you've got to stand up on this. You got to stand strong and demand justice, that this investigation be reopened, and that this white Hispanic cop, pale-skinned Hispanic cop, goes to jail, and that we can at least get some kind of justice in the aftermath of all of this. I don't trust the state troopers. I don't trust the Texas Rangers. I don't trust the Attorney General's office, Ken Paxton, who has plenty of problems and scandals on his own. Okay? I don't trust any of these people. To put it the way that another colleague put it, which America in general, yes, but Texas especially, is an exceptional slave practicing state. Now, I also got word, and I've known a number of friends and colleagues and people in fellowship who have went to PV. Recently, with the revelation of this Sandra Bland cell phone footage, a number of people have been commenting that stretch of highway in the area near the school is a notorious stop point or checkpoint of officers targeting us for their revenue and for basically their slave patrol enforcement, because of that caveat that they have of the 13th Amendment, the last provision. So if you don't already know this, you need to spread this around. We need to have some awareness, and we need to have some conflict and crisis management and behavior policy in place. For the brothers and sisters, for the community that's in this area in Prairie View, Texas, and Prairie View A&M University, you need to be very careful about this stretch of highway and other areas where these slave patrols are really going to be enforcing these black codes. Maybe one thing you could do I mean, I'm not 100% familiar with the layout of the campus and of the city, but since it seems to be a very busy thoroughfare, maybe you take the scenic route. Okay, maybe you take the long way. Don't use that route anymore. Use a different route. And obviously, if there's a situation where if you are stopped, whether if it's legitimate or not, you need to forget about them being in control of the situation. You need to be in control of the situation. And what I mean by that is that you need to control, your temperament and your behavior. You need to understand how these laws and how these codes work. You need to know when to talk to one of these pigs and when not to, because you don't have to talk to them at all. You don't have to answer any questions. There's a certain level of compliance with some of the instructions that they'll give you, because if they stop you, it's a detention. And essentially, when you talk about a detention and an arrest, it's kind of it's a blurry line. Okay, when you're detained, when you're pulled over, essentially it's not that different than being arrested. So while you're detained, basically arrested, there's a certain protocol to this. So of course, if you're the driver of an automobile, they're going to be asking some things of you. Now, if it's passengers, not so much, because you're not operating that piece of that automobile at the time. There's a whole nother aspect of that when you get into this whole driver's license thing and freedom of travel and being a traveler who's not doing any business or commerce. I'm not going to get into that. If you know what I'm talking about, carry out that situation the way you feel is best. I'm not going to really get off into any tutorials on that information. I've pursued some of that myself within my own county, okay? And I'm not going to make this a platform to try to educate or provide any legal services for those aspects. But for those who are familiar with freedom of travel and the whole driver's license thing, and basically the DPS or a DMV, basically registering your property as commercial equipment, and with driver's licenses and all these and registration. If you already know what I'm talking about, pursue whatever you feel is best and do your homework. But for anyone who's kind of new to this, I would just advise you, take what I've given you so far, do the research for yourself. But at this point in time, I'm not going to be advising anyone or giving anyone any kind of legal counsel on those matters. Each person is going to have to seek out what they feel is best for themselves. But in these situations where you're dealing with these slave patrols, you're going to have to know how to handle the situation. And I don't know who they are. I don't know how much or how little training they have, and I don't know what's going on in their head. Some of them may be good people. I admit that. But I don't know that, so I can't assume that. I have to assume that you're a slave patrol, and I have to assume that you could be one of these secret Klan members that the federal government has said they found Klansmen and white supremacist nationals within the police force. I have to assume that. So while you're detained, keep your hands, whether visible, on the steering wheel, or if you're an occupant who's a passenger and not driving but still traveling, keep your hands on the ceiling, or keep your hands on a window, or keep your hands on the dashboard, or keep your hands on the headrest if you're sitting in a second or third row or something like that, where they can see your hands. That way they can't say you were doing anything or moving, or I felt threatened for my life, and I'm so scared because the black man is Superman Samson and he's gonna beat me up, and kill me, and maybe rape one of our women, all that kind of stuff. So remain calm. I know it could be a little scary or intimidating, but remain calm, remain in control. You don't even have to do that whole, I don't even do that yes sir, no sir, officer. I just say yes and no. I don't even do that. I just talk to them like I would talk to a regular person. So I don't even acknowledge them by sir or ma'am. I don't even acknowledge them by officer. I just say yes and no. Like I say, you don't have to talk to cops. And even under a detention, you have the right to remain silent within reason. Okay? So for example, if they ask you for your name, all you have to do, if you're so inclined, all you have to do is show them some form of identification. Whether if it's a passport, military ID, concealed carry ID, ID, driver's license, whatever it is that you carry as far as some type of identification. You don't have to verbally tell them your name. If you're the person who owns that automobile and if it's registered within that local jurisdiction, they already know your information. If you have a driver's license or something like that, when they've run the plates, okay, they already have your picture on file on the laptop that they keep in their enforcer, in their cruiser, okay? They already know everything about your license and your ID and registration, your name, your address, basically everything that's on file, everything you filled out as far as a piece of paper, or everything that you filled out online, they already know that, okay? So, and that's if it's your automobile. Now, if you're borrowing like a friend or family member or neighbors, or if it's like a rental car or something like that, if you're an Uber driver where you're renting an automobile from Uber to conduct business, then that's maybe a different situation. But if you own and if it's registered under your name, or co-owned and co-registered, then they already have that information. So if they ask you your name, and if you're so inclined, the only thing you have to do is provide them identification. You don't have to verbally tell them your name. You don't have to say anything. You do not have to talk to cops. You don't have to communicate to them. You don't have to say anything. If they ask for credentials, if you want to show them those credentials, show them the credentials. But you don't have to talk to them at all. If they ask, is this you? My answer would be, can't you see the information that's on this piece of identification? Or, can't you see what is placed on this credential that was administered by the authority that you're employed by? That would be my answer. I wouldn't say anything. If they ask for credentials, I would let them know where those credentials are placed, and then I would ask them, do I have permission to go get them? Because see, that's another thing too when we talk about these slave patrols and how the system is played. A lot of times when they pull you over, they ask license and registration, or they'll ask, where is it? See, my whole thing is, if I'm going to ask someone, do they have something, but if I don't want them to produce it at the time, I would clearly say that. I would say, okay, I'm going to ask you, do you have a license, registration, and insurance, and all this and that? At this point in time, I don't want you to get them. I just simply want you to answer the question, yes or no, do you have them? And then the person answers. Then I would be, okay, now I'm going to ask you, where do you keep that information if you do have it? Once again, don't get it. I'm just asking, where do you keep it? So I know where you're going to. And then the person will answer, if they have it, okay, I keep it here, I keep it there, it's in my purse, it's in this and that, yada, yada, yada. Then the final question would be, okay, now at this time, I'm going to ask you to produce that information that you've told me that you've had, that you said you keep in this particular location. Then if that person starts reaching into a different area that they described, then I would, pause the situation and say, now wait a minute, now you told me that it was here, why are you reaching there? Unless they communicated, oh, I forgot, I didn't put it in my such and such today, I put it over here. Unless they clearly communicated that. So that's, to me, that's how it should be, and that's how the training should be if they're going to be doing all these traffic stops for their revenue and for their business, and to try to escalate, not de-escalate, because that's what it's really all about. These traffic stops are not about protect and serve and de-escalation. They're about escalation, because they're trying to get something more. They're trying to get some drugs, or they're trying to get you arrested, or they're trying to, get something more than just a little traffic ticket. Because the more that they can get, the more revenue it is, and the greater bonus that they have coming in. So don't believe this crap that you hear about de-escalation. The slave patrols are not there to de-escalate. They're there to escalate the situation. So you, as your own individual, as a private citizen, as a private individual, you have to be in control of the situation to de-escalate the situation. Don't allow them to escalate. You have to de-escalate the situation, and you have to be in control. Don't let the slave patrol be in control of the situation. You, as your own person, you as a child of God, you have to be in control of that situation to de-escalate it. Okay, so this is how I handle the situation. When they ask me for something, in general, the way I play it nowadays, I say, yes, I have this, and this is where I keep it. And then if they don't say anything after that, then I ask specifically, do I have your permission to go to this particular said area to show you my information? One example, say I keep my insurance on my cell phone. Okay, I don't keep the paper card. I used to. So that could even be another example. If you want to record it by all means. Consider it as a First Amendment audit. It's perfectly within your right to do so. If they have a body cam or a dash cam, you got your cameras also. So we all got cameras. Everything would be even from that standpoint. Okay, that's what I do. I tell them, yes, I have this or that and the other. I keep it in this such and such place. And if they don't say anything after that, because typically that's not how they communicate to you. Their communication and their training, quote unquote, is very poor, but it's done that way intentionally, I believe. Then I say, do I have your permission, or do I have your consent to go to this said area so I can show you this information that you were asking about? And then I give them the information, and then they give it back, and that's it. I don't say anything else. I don't make small talk. I don't ask about the weather. I don't, how is your day going? I don't talk to them at all. If they ask me, how is my day going, or where am I headed, or I don't say anything. If they ask me, why am I not speaking, I would say, I don't have to answer those questions. I'm just going to keep my silence if that's okay with you. That's it. If they, because see, that's one of the tricks that they try to do. Sometimes they try to make small talk with you because they want to see if you have loose lips and if you're going to tell on yourself. Like if they ask, where are you going? Where are you headed? Where are you coming from? Just tell them, I don't have to answer that question. Okay, and leave it at that. I'm not going to argue with them. I'm not going to raise my voice. I'm not going to get an attitude. I'm not going to do any of that, because I know the laws and the codes. I know these so-called rights that are supposed to be out there. I know what the situation is. I do not talk with them. I don't make small talk. If they ask for credentials, I show them credentials. I keep my hands where they can see them. Another thing I do, I don't even roll the window down all the way. Here's another thing you need to do too. You need to keep your car door locked. Keep everything locked. I even keep my glove box locked. I keep everything locked. Okay? You only have to roll your window down if you're gonna speak, that is, to where you can hear them and they can hear you. So I don't roll my window down all the way. I just only roll it down enough to where we can communicate to the minimal amount that needs to be done. If they ask me to roll it down, I said, I can hear you, you can hear me. This is fine enough. For your safety and for my safety, I would prefer to keep the window where it is. Keep your seat belt on also. Just because you pulled over, and you're on the side of the road or something like that, and the automobile is not moving, I keep my seatbelt on, because a seatbelt in that situation is also kind of like a safety device, even when the automobile is not moving. Keep your seatbelt on, keep everything locked up. You don't have to roll your window down all the way. You only have to roll it down enough to where you can hear them and they can hear you. And like I say, if you want to record the encounter, by all means, record. Keep an SD card or an extra SIM card or something like that in whatever devices it is that you use. Keep some additional storage in whatever devices it is that you use. That way, because there's been times, especially the way I deal with them, a lot of times we're going to be sitting there for a while, and a lot of times they call for backup and it's like 3 or 4 other squad cars. I don't really get pulled over a lot, praise the Most High, but in the situations that I do get pulled over, and because how I handle the situation, chances are when I get pulled over, or if I get pulled over, we're going to be sitting there for maybe like 30 minutes, and they usually call additional cops in, and they're all standing by the car and looking through the window. If it's at night, they're shining the flashlight through. I don't even look at them, okay? When it gets to that point, I turn the car off, because I know we're going to be sitting there for a while, so I'm not going to burn any more gas. I turn the car off, I sit there, I got my seatbelt still on, I have my hands on the wheel, they're walking around the car, flashlight and all this kind of stuff. I don't look at them, I don't say anything to them, I don't turn my head, I just avert my eyes, to use my peripheral vision, just to kind of be aware of the situation. I might turn my head slightly, just to kind of know what's going on, but I never like whip my head all the way around, look behind me, whip my head off to the side. I never make any big move like that, because I don't want them to feel like that, I'm just really acknowledging their presence. I want to be aware of the situation, but I don't want to be so obvious and aware of the situation to where it could be perceived that they're getting the best of me. Okay, I don't acknowledge them. I don't do any hand gestures or finger gestures. I don't speak to them. I don't acknowledge them at all. Usually the way it's going to be, only in that situation, only one of them is going to talk to you anyway, not various different ones. One of them is going to be the communicator, and the other ones will simply stand by and do the BS that they do. Go ahead, let them do it, because I know I'm clean. I know I don't have anything. I know how these laws work. I know how these codes work. I know the system that we live in. So I'm not really worried about it from that standpoint. So you have to be in control of the situation. Here's another little tip. If they hand you something on one of their slips or a piece of paper that they have on a clipboard, look on the back. Number one, read everything, and if you have questions, by all means ask questions. If you don't understand any of the wording that's on the piece of paper that they give you. But also, when they give you a form, and before you sign it, flip over on the back side or different pieces of paper of whatever form it may be, and see if there's any kind of a symbol or any kind of a letter or a number maybe on the back of that form, because sometimes they leave little codes. It's not going to be spelled out like a sentence. It'll be a letter or a symbol or a number or something like that. And if you do see any kind of symbol or letter or number, go ahead and ask them, what's this symbol, what's this number mean, or what's this letter mean? They're not going to tell you, but do it just so that you let them know that you know a little bit about their practices. They're probably going to tell you it's something for like internal matters or something like that, or it's some kind of a documentation. That's probably what their answer is going to be, or they're just not going to say anything at all. Because see, they know they know when to keep quiet also. So you need to know when to keep quiet as well. Okay? But just go ahead and ask them, what's this letter mean? Or what's this number mean? Or what does this symbol mean? That way you're letting them know that you know how the practice works. Okay? And that you're up to their shenanigans. Okay? And then, sign the little notice or whatever, or summons that they give you, and then that's it. And then either they'll tell you you're free to go, or then you ask them, is this detention over with? Am I free to go? And that's it. You need to know how to handle that situation when you're in an automobile. If you're a pedestrian and if you're on foot, now like I say, you need to handle the situation however you feel the most comfortable with, but I'm just here to let you know what you're legally obligated to do. There is no law that says you need to carry any kind of ID as a pedestrian. There is no law if there has been no crime that has been committed or no property damage or theft. There is no law that says you have to produce any identification or reveal your identity. So if you're walking and if you're a pedestrian and if there's no crime being committed or no property damage, you don't have to talk to them. You don't have to show them anything. You don't have to do anything. I would just simply stand there. If you already have your phone out, you can start recording. Now, if you don't have your phone out, you have to decide if you want to go in your pocket or something like that and get your phone or something to start recording. That's just something you have to decide to do. I'm not going to advise you what to do in that situation. If you're going to do something, you should communicate it or ask permission, which they'll probably tell you no if you ask. And maybe you say, I'm getting my phone to call my lawyer or something like that, but you need to do whatever you feel is best. But if you're a pedestrian and if there's no crime, or if no one called 911, or if there was no property damage or anything like that, or bodily harm that was done, no personal injury or anything like that, you don't have to talk to them. You don't have to show them anything. You don't need ID. There's no law that says you need identification as a pedestrian. There is no such law. Okay? That's just a system of control that they have. That's how these race soldiers, that's how they operate. Okay? So that's how you handle that situation when you're a pedestrian. And if you want to record, or if you want to call someone, if you retain a lawyer, whether if you're driving, if you're traveling, or if you're just walking as a pedestrian, if you have a lawyer or a family member or some kind of counsel, someone who you confide in, if you want to call that person, you can make that call, as someone who advises you, or someone that you're in fellowship with, or if you want to record the situation, record the situation. But we need crisis and conflict resolution training in our community on how to deal with these race soldiers. So that's what I'm kind of here to do. I didn't really mean to get off too much into all of this, but I guess it's a good thing to do. Since it came to my attention that in this area of PV, that this is a very common and standard practice. You need to know how to handle the situation. Now, if you're doing something that technically is supposed to be illegal, I can't really help you any further than that. The only thing that I would tell you is that, once again, even if you are doing something that technically is supposed to be illegal, you don't have to talk to them. You do, and if you're going to be arrested at that point, as they will read you when they read you your Miranda, you do have the right to remain silent. And if you're possibly guilty of something, I would advise you not to say anything and wait until you get a lawyer. Wait until you have your counsel. Don't talk to them. The less you say, probably the better, because anything you say or do will be used against you. in the kangaroo court system in this country that we live in apartheid America. So to the community, like I say, you need to mobilize, you need to organize, you need to do everything you need to do to get pushback on this revelation with Sandra Bland and this cover-up. Okay, you need to demand of the local authorities, of the state troopers, of Texas Rangers, of the Attorney General's office. You know, I'm going to say this also real quick too. Special prosecutors and grand juries, I know that's been thrown out a lot in our community over the decades, but special prosecutors and grand juries are not really that good of a thing, because special prosecutors have less accountability than regular prosecutors usually do. And with grand juries, typically with grand juries are a lot more secretive than a typical jury or trial process. Okay? So when you're talking about special prosecutors and grand juries, there tends to be a lot less transparency and a lot more secrecy, and there tends to be a lot less accountability also. So I would not, in these types of situations, I would not really be harping for special prosecutors and grand juries. I would choose other ways to mobilize and to organize. If anything, if I'm going to call in for some other authorities, I would be calling in for federal or national authorities, as well as other NGOs and international organizations to get involved. That's the avenue I will be working, but not so much with these special prosecutors and grand juries, because we shouldn't be surprised that we're not really getting any justice with these special prosecutors and grand juries, because they're not really intended to do that. You know, they only have a certain amount of accountability, and there's a lot of secrecy that goes on. So my advice to the community in Prairie View is that you need to call, and I know who's in office right now, so, but still, you need to call for the federal government to open up a civil rights investigation on the local authorities. And if there's other NGO, you know, non-governmental organizations, as well as international, whether, you know, these are domestic or international organizations, you need to coordinate with them to put pressure on the local authorities, as well as to put pressure on the federal government. And for the ADOS community, as well as the diaspora community, because I'm sure we got some brothers and sisters from other locations in the diaspora that attend this university. You need solidarity, you need unity within fellowship, within economics, within your social movings, with how you move in the legal process. You know, we need solidarity overall. Let's support each other's businesses. Let's fellowship with each other. Let's communicate. Let's look out for each other. Love on one another. Protect each other. We don't need any division, and you know, we got enough enemies, spiritual and physical. Okay, we have enough enemies as it is already. So we don't need to make enemies amongst each other. We need unity and solidarity. Now is the time, here and forevermore, to come together. Okay? Because if we're unified from within, we're going to be that much stronger of a force dealing with outside forces. Okay? There is power in our unity. All right? Let's all come together. And for those of you who are in this community, if you're familiar with the check stops and the checkpoints and the little tricks and the speed traps and all the little traps that they try to set up, look, change your behavior. You need to think of this like a military campaign. That's what I like about the brother and the elder Neely Fuller Jr. Because Neely Fuller Jr. addresses and diagnoses this thing properly. We are basically like at a state of war, or at least like a soft war or a cold war with America, okay? And we are like prisoners of war. That's what apartheid is all about. So if you're living in a state of some kind of a warlike state, you can't conduct yourself like it's peacetime. You need to conduct yourself like it's wartime. And that's what it is when we live here in America. We are prisoners of war, okay? So you can't be going around willy-nilly, nonchalant. You got to keep your head on a swivel, and you got to orchestrate yourself like a soldier or a diplomat on enemy territory, or within inside of a prison or a ghetto or a concentration camp or a perpetual state of detention. That's, this is our Holocaust, okay? This is how we have to do it, all right? So on the battlefield, and since we're definitely disadvantaged and underserved and underprivileged, on the battlefield, a smaller force that's going up against a larger force, they're gonna maneuver and have, strategic retreats, and they're gonna find ways to move around. I mean, one of the principles of the art of war is when you're a smaller force and you're going up against a larger force, you don't throw yourself up against a brick wall. You find ways to move around and to maneuver and to take on your enemy indirectly without going at them directly. So since we're prisoners of war, as stated by Neely Fuller Jr., it would be foolish, it is not intelligent to go at a greater force head on in a full frontal assault. You need to find ways to move around and go around and chip away and pick at the enemy in an indirect fashion. It's a marathon, not a sprint, okay? So when they set up these checkpoints and stop points and speed traps and all these little tricks that they use to try to get us, there's nothing wrong with taking different routes, taking the road less traveled, taking the scenic route, taking the long way to avoid interaction, to avoid confrontation, to avoid basically what would be like a full frontal assault. Because that's like throwing yourself up against a brick wall. What you're gonna do, you're gonna hit that wall, okay? That's what's gonna happen. It's nothing wrong with it. You're not weak, you're not a punk, you're not afraid, you're not a coward. This is intelligence, okay? This is common sense. This is strategic. You're being smart. You're maneuvering. You're exercising intelligence. All right? So this is what I would recommend the brothers and sisters in this community and all these other communities to do. You need to exercise this intelligence. You have to think strategically. This is war, and you're going up against an enemy force. They are enemy combatants. You have to assume that they're enemy combatants. Some of them might be nice, some of them may be good. I acknowledge that. But I have to assume that they're enemy combatants, and I have to treat them like an enemy. These are the rules of engagement. Okay? And I wish that we just got together and that we congregated and communicated and had fellowship, particularly in private platforms and platforms that we own. I wish that we would be doing that to where we would be on code and we would have protocols and ways of operating. Because see, all these things I'm telling you, I exercise these things in my daily life. Because I know I'm a prisoner of war. I know that we live in a state of war, and I assume that they are the enemy, that they are enemy combatants. And I know that we're dealing with a larger force. And I know that we live in apartheid America, and this is our Holocaust. This is our captivity. So I conduct myself as such. I think like a soldier. I think like a diplomat. I think like foreign relations. I think like a military strategy and a military campaign. That's how I think. I don't think like a civilian. You're not a civilian. All this talk about citizenship and integration and civil rights and, you're not a citizen. You're not a civilian. America looks at you as the enemy. It's time you realize that. Okay? So to the community in PV and to the community all over the United States and even across the world, especially for the brothers and sisters in the diaspora that live in these, white majority countries or white controlled countries. These principles, these practices, these strategies, these tactics will help you worldwide. If you're living there permanently, temporarily, if you're traveling, if you're just passing through, And if it's areas where I know that it's just not that smart or it's not that safe or we're severely outnumbered, I just try to avoid those areas. I stick to areas where I know where the numbers work better in our favor. Good thing about me, I live in an area that's not white majority. I live in an area that's white minority. They're only about 25% and their numbers are only getting smaller. Okay, so that's one good thing about the area I live in, and that's why I like it here in my county, because they're only 25% and their numbers are shrinking and going down for a number of different reasons, and I love it. Okay, if you need to relocate to an area like this and do your homework and put yourself in a yourself, your family, your business, in a different area that works better for you, where the demographics work better for you, then start doing your homework and start making moves to relocate, to expatriate or repatriate, depending on how you want to look at it, with what has happened with the Great Migration. Look into doing that, and that way we can consolidate ourselves in areas where they are the minority and even possibly we are the majority. And then if we come together and have unity, then we don't really have to worry about dealing with them so much. We just have to be concerned about what policies we put in place for our own people. And I was looking at the demographics of Prairie View, and particularly the area around this school is like 83% ADOS. But then when you look at Waller County, I believe it is, it's about like 75% them, and only about 25% us. So I'm not sure how the demographics have been in this area, in this county overall. I don't think it's really any kind of intelligence to place an HBCU, something that's supposed to be our institution, something that's supposed to be our safe space, and place it in one of these redneck, hillbilly, hicktown county areas. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it is what it is. It's not like the school is going to be moving anytime soon and relocating, or that the demographics would just necessarily change to where everything would be reversed. Like I say, if you already live in that area, it is what it is. You're gonna have to decide what's best for you. But if you don't live in that area, and if you're not from that area, even though PV is in the area, I mean, there's other HBCUs around. There's Texas Southern University, my mother's alma mater. I mean, I know that you have this whole PV TSU rivalry. I mean, but at this point it's really silly, because in the case of PV, you're sitting here surrounded by those rednecks, in the county, and the slave patrols. And in Houston, the numbers are a lot different and the numbers a lot better. Not saying that there's problems, but strategically, I'd rather be in Harris County or the Houston area than in Waller County, I believe it is, and PV. Okay, that's just me. You know, from a demographics and from an intelligence standpoint, it makes sense. So getting into this whole PV TSU rivalry is kind of silly. Okay, you need to look at the big picture. You know, it's not about rivalry and all this other kind of stuff. It's about strategy. Okay, and Houston and Harris County right now appears to be the better strategy. So, or if there's just another HBCU, you know, that's better. A lot of these HBCUs have taken away the out-of-state, out-of-district fees, extra fees. You still have to pay room and board if you don't live in that area. You know, so you have that going on for you. My recommendation is, if you're getting an education, you know, get the best and the cheapest education possible. So if you never have to leave the house to go to school, that's fine. If you can stay at home and save money, or if you can get a cheap apartment in your local area and save money instead of having to travel across the country, unless you're getting a scholarship or something like that, you know, that makes the most sense. I mean, you're there to get the education that you need, the best education for the least amount of money. Okay? That's the way I look at it. So, knowing I have plenty of universities near me, and I have a HBCU that's near me, I never have to leave the county. Okay? I never do. I could stay in the area, go to school, get an education. I don't have to change my living situation. And I could still go and graduate and accomplish my goals. So, we need to stay on this, and I'm going to be paying attention to what goes to this. You know, if there's any brothers and sisters in the PV area or anywhere else in the world, you know, just reach out, let's contact, and let's have some kind of fellowship, and let's get a protocol in place. You know, they have their codes, and we need to have our code also. We need to have our own policies in place. And we need to evaluate these so-called institutions and spaces that are supposed to be for us. So till the next time, Shalom.